In a moment that has stunned fans worldwide, Snowbird Brown has broken her long-held silence to reveal explosive details about her father, Billy Brown. For years, the untamed patriarch of Alaskan Bush People was celebrated for his larger-than-life persona. But behind the scenes, a hidden story of sacrifice and relentless pressure was quietly unfolding. Now, Snowbird's raw confession exposes a side of Billy that few ever imagined, one marked by heart-wrenching loss and the brutal realities of a life lived on the edge. What exactly was he worn down by? Was it the unforgiving wilderness, the relentless demands of reality TV fame, or something far more personal? Join us as we dive deep into the untold truths. Stay tuned, because what comes next will leave you speechless. To truly capture the impact of this critical moment, our story must begin at its very beginning. The family's unwavering patriarch, Billy Brown, was a living example of this tough culture. He guided his family past the bounds of traditional living, over rocky terrain, and through hard winters. However, beneath the exhilarating experiences and stunning scenery was a more sinister reality, one that gradually undermined the very fortitude that had once characterized him. Billy Brown's path was never one of luxury or comfort. Tragic events plagued his early years after his December 3, 1952, birth in Fort Worth, Texas. Billy's world completely collapsed when his parents and sister perished in a terrible plane crash when he was only 16 years old, leaving him alone and lost. A young child was suddenly thrown into a harsh reality of homelessness, unstable finances, and a desperate fight for survival. Billy's resolve solidified during these early years. He vowed to restore what had been lost, rather than give up. He committed to creating a new path for himself, one that was characterized by fortitude, self-reliance, and an unwavering dedication to his family. When Billy first met Amy Brown, that promise began to take shape. Despite their considerable age difference and her family's disapproval, they were closely linked, a bond forged by a desire to break free from the constraints of traditional society and a shared dream of freedom. The foundation for the unusual life that would characterize the Brown family was established by their union, which was born against all odds. Together, Billy and Amy adopted a way of life that prioritized independence over contemporary conveniences. They created their own way of life in the vast wild wilderness of Alaska, fishing in icy waters, building shelters by hand, and surviving harsh winters that would have broken most people. Billy saw these difficulties as character tests and badges of honor that validated his faith in the strength of perseverance and grit, not as failures. As the Brown family grew over the years, they welcomed 7 children who grew up surrounded by the unadulterated beauty and unrelenting struggles of nature. Early on, every child discovered that living in the wilderness was both an honor and a challenge, a never-ending lesson in self-reliance, survival, and the enduring ties of family. Television producers eventually became interested in the family's story, with all of its rocky victories and unseen tragedies. The reality show Alaskan Bush People, which aired in 2014, captivated millions of viewers with its promise of adventure and unadulterated living by showcasing the Browns' remarkable life in the wild. A man who had devoted his life to a dream that many admired but few truly understood, suffered from years of physically taxing work, harsh weather, and isolation. Billy disregarded medical advice and refused to slow down in spite of his heart problems, chronic respiratory problems, and seizures. He pushed his body to the limit because he was adamant about living life on his terms, frequently ignoring the growing evidence that the wilderness was taking its toll. Then, the unimaginable occurred in February 2021. Billy Brown died at the age of 68 after suffering a fatal seizure at the family's Washington homestead at the end of season 13. Both the Brown family and the loyal Alaskan Bush People fan base were shocked by his unexpected passing. In addition to being a devastating blow to the family's morale, Billy's passing marked an immense change that made everyone face the harsh realities. There were troubling concerns about the viability of such a lifestyle after the death of a man who had been a legendary figure and the very personification of the wild wilderness. How could the very dreams he had so fervently pursued bring down a man who had once appeared to be unbeatable? What, more significantly, had this unrelenting lifestyle done to him over the years? Snowbird Brown, known as Birdie, had been grieving in private for years. Beneath a facade of silent fortitude and unyielding fortitude, the loss of her father was a wound that never fully healed. However, the burden of unsaid grief became intolerable as the years went by. In a rare instance of honest openness, Snowbird at last revealed the real price of Billy's unrelenting way of life. Her disclosure was straightforward, but devastating. She captured the profound effect of a life of constant struggle on her father by referring to him as worn down. What did worn down mean to her? Was it just the physical strain of the hostile wilderness? The years spent fighting harsh conditions without the conveniences of contemporary medical care? Or did it go deeper? A reference to the psychological and emotional toll of living in continual defiance of the expectations of traditional society and carrying a legacy based on adversity. Despite being few in number, Snowbird's words were heavy with decades of unsaid regret and unsaid suffering. Fans were compelled by her admission to reconsider the story they had long admired, the portrayal of an unflappable, fearless patriarch, and instead recognize the weakness and vulnerability that lie beneath that strong exterior. Snowbird revealed in her heartfelt message that she had felt as if a piece of herself had passed away with her father. The loss of a loved one was only one aspect of the grief. Another was realizing that her father's death was partly caused by the very way of life he had so fervently adopted. Those three words, worn down, were a sobering reality to Snowbird, a cry of grief that described unending sacrifice, unrelenting pressure, and the high personal price of a dream that required everything. Every aspect of the Brown family was affected by Billy Brown's death, which changed their lives and cast a long shadow over their once unbreakable spirit. For many years, the Browns had been portrayed as a family that persevered through hardship in one of the harshest settings on the planet. Behind that exterior, though, each family member was dealing with the loss in a different way. Following Billy's passing, his widow, Amy Brown, became the unwavering pillar of the family. Amy had to take on the roles of grieving wife and family leader while battling her own life-threatening lung cancer. She was directly responsible for carrying on Billy's legacy and making sure the family's unusual way of life could go on. Amy's resolve remained unwavering despite the threat of personal health crises, financial instability, and legal disputes upending their lives. 4 years after the tragedy, Snowbird's disclosure provided fresh insight into the inner conflicts that had long been concealed behind the Brown family's public image. Recognizing that the very basis of the family legacy was based on sacrifices that might have ultimately been too great to bear was more important than merely preserving it. Could the Browns, who had once been bound together by Billy Brown's unwavering spirit, manage to continue without him? That was the big question now. The program Alaskan Bush People, which had long praised the Browns' wilderness conquest skills, abruptly became a focus for more in-depth reflection. Both admirers and critics started to wonder if the once glorified way of life was sustainable, or if there was a risk of self-destruction involved. A realization was compelled by Snowbird's candid admission. Although living off the grid is a noble goal that defies contemporary norms, it may also come at a high and unforgiving cost. Billy fervently advocated a lifestyle that required unrelenting physical effort and emotional resilience, one that was remote from the comforts of modern healthcare and urban living. As Snowbird's revelation implies, the very characteristics that made him a legendary figure in the eyes of many were also the ones that might have ultimately led to his early death. It took bravery for Snowbird to speak the truth. It was a choice to emerge from the shadow of her father's imposing legacy and make public the unadulterated, unrefined suffering that had been suppressed for too long. Snowbird's revelations are both a tribute and a warning to the Brown family as they embark on an uncertain future. They serve as a reminder that, although the wild charm of independence and self-reliance can inspire greatness, it must be restrained with compassion, care, and the readiness to heal. Snowbird's courageous admission is a moment of reckoning for the viewers who have long admired the Browns' incredible journey, a call to honor both the dream and the human cost of that dream.